Well, good afternoon. I don't know about you, I came to hear everything that's happened so far. What fantastic examples of leadership, from Todd to Fabiana, Donna, to all of you who have given so much, begun this wonderful organization, supported and funded this wonderful organization. It is truly a pleasure to be in the company of so many fantastic leaders. I want to begin by telling you a couple stories, if I may, to perhaps put the ACE story in some context. One begins in my life. When I was 8 years old, I went to Sunday school, and my mother that year happened to be my Sunday school teacher. And she looked out at her class, and she said to me and her other students, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." Those words landed in my young life because I must tell you I didn't feel very gifted. I was kind of a goody two-shoes middle child. My sister was smarter and more talented. My brother was a star athlete. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I must tell you that my young life was not exactly a sterling resume. I graduated from college, very fortunately, but with a degree in medieval history and philosophy. Why does everyone laugh when I say that? Well, you know why, because it's not exactly a glittering resume. I went to law school, I quit, dropped out before the very first exam, and went back to work full-time doing what I had done part-time to put myself through school. I was a secretary. I typed and filed and answered the phones for a little 9-person real estate firm. Not exactly someone you would say would become a CEO one day, but way back when I was 8 years old, and even when I was 23 and 24 years old, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, but my mother's words landed. It was a promise to me, as she was trying to promise her other students. You're gifted. You have gifts. And those words were also a challenge to me, that I had to find and use my God-given gifts. Now I'll tell you another story from many, many thousands of miles away from here. One of the things I had the great privilege to do before I ran for the presidency was chair an organization called Opportunity International. It is the largest private microfinance organization in the world. Perhaps you are familiar with the concept of microfinance, where poor people who do not have access to a line of credit are given loans and tools and training in order to become entrepreneurs and lift themselves and their families out of poverty. Opportunity International has lent about $8 billion, $100 at a time. And after chairing a global board meeting, I traveled to, the board meeting was in New Delhi, India, and I traveled to the slums of New Delhi because I wanted to meet some of our clients. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in the slums of New Delhi, but they're pretty grim places. Mountains of trash and marauding animals and sewage in the streets and people piled on top of each other. It is a desperate set of circumstances. And as I climbed a rickety ladder to get to the top of a roof, to sit down with our clients, 10 of them, all women, I was steeling myself because I thought that I would see in their eyes the desperation of the circumstances all around them. But when I sat down with them, I did not see desperation. I saw pride, focus, determination, hope. One young woman had told me that how frightened she was to take this loan because her husband and her in-laws were very much against it. This isn't what women did in her culture, but she found her courage and she took her loan. And I said, well, how does your husband and your in-laws, how do they feel about this now? And she said, oh, they're happy, they work for me. I could tell you a million stories like that. Because what I have learned in my life, and I have been in business and charities and government bureaucracies, I've lived and traveled and worked all over the world for decades, what I can tell you with certainty is that each of us are gifted by God, and that all of us have the capacity and the desire to live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning. I can tell you with certainty as well that every single one of us is capable of leadership, but I can also tell you what we all know, that every one of us needs somebody to take a chance on us. Every one of us needs somebody to give us a helping hand. And most importantly of all, every one of us needs somebody to see our possibilities. For me, those somebodies were two men many years ago while I was typing and filing in that dead-end job with no thought of what my future was other than I had to pay my rent. Two men came to my desk and said, "We have been watching you and we think you could do something more than type and file. Do you want to know what we do?" They introduced me to the world of business. They inspired me to go on and get an MBA, but most importantly of all, they saw possibilities in me. And because they saw possibilities in me, I saw possibilities in myself that I did not know were there. I tell you what I have learned over and over and over again. I didn't set out to become a CEO, but everywhere I went, from entry level on up, I found problems, festering problems. And everywhere I went, I also found people who knew how to solve the problem. It's just they'd never been asked or they'd never been given the opportunity. Everyone is gifted by God. Everyone has more potential than they realize, and people are capable of solving the problems that impact their lives. But all of us need someone to give us a chance, someone to give us a helping hand. You know, at the luncheon earlier in our few minutes when we were able to talk and eat, we were talking about one of the challenges of the 21st century, cybersecurity. In a way, we are living in an unprecedented time. I remind people that that smartphone that you're holding, that you're tethered to if you're like me, whatever kind of smartphone you have, that smartphone was introduced a mere 10 years ago. So for 10 years, and only 10 years, for the first time in human history, any individual, anywhere, can get a hold of any piece of information, for good or for ill, and can communicate with anyone else. That is historic. It is not hyperbole to say that is unprecedented. It is not exaggeration to say this is the only time in human history that this has ever happened. It is revolutionary. It empowers an individual like never before. And while this capability also presents unprecedented problems, in a way, to me, the changes that we have seen over the last 10 years remind me of that old saying. You know that old saying, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And despite the fact that we are living in a time of unprecedented change, the more this stays the same. Everyone is gifted by God. Everyone has more potential than they realize. Everyone is capable of living a life of dignity and purpose and meaning and solving the problems that impact their lives and their communities, but we all need somebody to take a chance on us. Now, it is worth asking, if everyone in the world is gifted by God, if everyone has more potential than they realize, if that woman in India had a brand new future because somebody took a chance on her and saw possibilities, why is it? Why is it? How is it that our nation is so unique? Why is it that more things have been more possible for more people from more places here in this country than anywhere else on earth? The reason is because of the exceptional nature of our nation. And I know sometimes we use the term exceptional and we get confused about what we mean, but this is the only nation on the face of the planet and in history that was founded on ideas, not geography, not conquest, not tribal loyalties, not ethnicity. We are the only nation that was founded on ideas. And the two most important ideas that founded this nation are what? First, that everyone has inalienable rights. That's another way of saying everybody has God-given gifts. Everybody has unlimited potential if we know how to unlock it. And the other core idea, and of course we've had to work hard as a nation to make sure that everyone has the opportunity that their gifts should provide to them. We continue to work hard, as evidenced by the people in this room. But the other core idea that we all believe, when our nation is at our best, we believe that people are not defined by their circumstances. That it doesn't matter who you are, or how you start, or where you start, or what you look like, or what your opinions are, or what your circumstances. Here we believe people are defined by their God-given gifts and their choices. Education, we all know this, education is the foundation of that promise of America. And education also is the foundation, the unshakable foundation, the irreplaceable foundation that allows someone to begin to discover their own God-given gifts and to unlock their potential. We do not believe that people are defined by their circumstances, and yet we know, as the film earlier so clearly showed us, we know that people's futures are defined by their circumstances. And we know as well that the status quo is failing too many kids. That's not to say that every public school is bad, not at all. It's not to say that there aren't incredibly caring teachers in public and private schools. That is true, but it is to say that the data is inescapable. The status quo fails too many. What could be more fundamental? What could be more American than saying every parent deserves a choice so that every child has a chance? And yet, somehow that's a controversial idea. Somehow the school choice movement is controversial, and it leads to a lot of conflict. Why would that be? Well, I'll tell you. It's because in every situation, the status quo is powerful. The status quo has great power. And the reason the status quo always has power, even when the status quo creates problems that fester and that are obvious to everyone, the reason the status quo has power is because people are invested in the status quo. It doesn't make people bad. It makes people human. People are invested in the status quo. And so often people will work to preserve the status quo even when it's not working very well. And so it takes someone to challenge the status quo in order to unlock the possibilities that are all around us. I think the possibility that we have as a nation is to raise up leaders in every community, because everyone has the God-given gift to lead. This I know, and we have seen so many wonderful examples of that just today. Todd's example, Fabiana's example, Donna's example. Everyone has the God-given gift to lead, and so we should be lifting leaders up. It is what ACE does. Everyone is capable of leadership. You've heard the old saying, leaders are born, not made. That is not true. Leaders are made, not born, and everyone is capable of it. I have learned this over and over again. Sometimes I think in our culture right now, we're kind of a little confused about leadership. You know, our culture in a way celebrates what? 15 minutes of fame, instant gratification, self-indulgence, self-absorption. We don't really celebrate leadership all that often, or we get confused about what it is. So let's talk for a moment about what leadership is, although we have seen incredible examples on this stage today of leadership in its purest form. First of all, leadership is not title. It is not position. It is not power. It is not status. When I was a young secretary, I used to think whoever was in the corner office was the leader. That's how they got to the corner office, right? And then I got smarter and wiser, and I figured out there were people with big offices, big parking spaces, big perks, big titles, maybe big egos to go along with all of those things, and they were not leading. Leadership has nothing to do with position and title, although position can help a leader. Leadership is also not the same as management. Management's important. We all got to manage things. We got to manage our lives. We got to manage our families. We got to manage our businesses. But a manager does the best they can within existing constraints and conditions. A manager accepts the way things are. They accept and operate within constraints and conditions. That is not what a leader does. A leader changes constraints and conditions. A leader challenges the way things are. The purpose of a leader is to challenge the status quo. And the reason the purpose of leadership is to challenge the status quo is because it is always the status quo that allows problems to fester. A leader is a problem solver. A leader is not somebody with a big title. A leader instead is someone who serves others by unlocking potential in others. And most importantly of all, a leader solves problems. So what does leadership take? Again, you've seen it here already, but it's worth being explicit about it. Because we have an abundance of problems, and we have a scarcity of leadership. And so with potential leaders all around us, it is in our interest to lift all of them up. Leadership takes first courage. Because if challenging the status quo is the purpose of leadership, criticism is the price of leadership. Everyone who challenges the status quo, even if it's someone like Fiorina saying, I can do better. I am quite sure Fiorina was criticized by some of the other kids in her neighborhood. Why are you trying so hard? Why are you dreaming so big? Anyone who challenges the status quo will get criticized, and so courage is required to withstand the criticism. It is also courage that allows us to try something new. It took courage for the founders of this great organization to gather together those many years ago and say, we are going to do something different. We are going to try something new. Innovation means risk-taking, and risk-taking means mistake-making, and all of that means criticism. So courage is required in a leader. It takes character. What an old-fashioned word. But what is character? Character is when you know what the good things are that you have to cleave to. Character is knowing the difference between something fleeting, a fleeting fancy, and something real and true. Collaboration. Leadership takes collaboration. And in particular, it takes collaboration sometimes with people that are different than themselves, different than each of us. One thing is true, you all know it, but it's worth being explicit about it. There is nothing worth doing in this world that a single individual can accomplish on their own. There is nothing worth doing in this world that an individual can accomplish on their own. Every single one of us needs help. Every single one of us needs someone to collaborate with us. You are an incredible example of collaboration. Collaboration between teachers and students. Collaborations between a community and the families within that community. Collaboration between business and government. This is when problems get solved, when leaders of courage step forward, when they have the character to understand that their job is to build something lasting and true, and when they will collaborate with others, even sometimes that they don't always agree with, because they are focused together on a common goal and a worthy purpose that transcends their disagreements. But perhaps the most important quality of leadership of all, and the one that I think this organization and your graduates so beautifully embody, perhaps the most important quality in a leader of all, is the ability to see possibilities, hope, optimism. These aren't nice-to-haves in leadership, they are must-haves. You know, there are two kinds of people. Two kinds of people. There are people who will approach a circumstance, a set of circumstances, and they will look at those circumstances and they will say, well, I can't do this. They won't let me do that. I better not try that other thing. And then there are people who will see exactly the same set of circumstances and say, we could try this. We could accomplish that. We can achieve more. People who see possibilities allow others to see possibilities. They lift people up. Optimism is the fundamental belief that things can be better and people will rise to the occasion. Yes. Leaders need to be realistic, clear-eyed and realistic, because without realism, you cannot understand the problem. But without optimism and hope, you can never solve the problem. When we are at our best, we believe people are not defined by their circumstances, and we are all better off when communities and everyone in them is lifted up. Our communities and our nation are better off when more of our children can find and use their God-given gifts, and when we lift up as many leaders as possible, regardless of their circumstances, so that they can help change those circumstances for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. What could be more fundamental than that, than believing in the God-given gifts of every single child in this nation, regardless of their circumstances, believing that there are leaders all around us if we will but see their possibilities and lift them up, and having the optimism and the courage and the collaboration and the character to know that when we work together, we can, in fact, make things better. ACE is an incredible example of leadership, as are your graduates, as are their families, because you have seen possibilities all around you, and because you have worked together with courage to seize those possibilities. The highest calling of a leader is to serve. The highest calling of a leader is to unlock potential in others, and that is what you do, day after day after day. So thank you for having the courage to challenge the status quo. Thank you for your dedication to the possibilities that you know reside in others. Thanks for your leadership, and thanks for knowing and proving over and over and over again that every child, every one of us, is gifted by God. We all need someone to take a chance on us. We all need somebody to give us a helping hand, but each of us and all of us can lead. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless you all.